The chamber was vast, shaped like a colosseum carved from metal and light, where 100 species gathered beneath banners that shimmered with alien emblems. The Interstellar Council's gift exchange was not merely ritual. It was theater, power, and subtle intimidation. Every year, civilizations arrived to flaunt treasures of their world, artifacts humming with energy, crystals that bent gravity, data tablets holding knowledge compressed beyond human comprehension. For humanity, still a relatively new voice among the stars, this ceremony was both invitation and test. The human delegation entered with modest offerings, artifacts from Earth carefully chosen to show meaning rather than might. A collection of literature etched into digital plates, bound in protective alloys so they could last millennia. A music archive, thousands of compositions ranging from symphonies to folk songs. A portable desalination device, simple but life-saving for colonies without abundant water. Modest compared to the others, yet rooted in survival and expression. The humans offered what defined them: resilience and culture. The protagonist, a human envoy dressed in dark diplomatic uniform, observed the others. Massive reptilian species clinked crystal shards that radiated heat. Insectoid collectives displayed pulsating amber spheres that stored living memories. Even smaller delegations seemed eager to outdo humanity. Still, the envoy remained calm. Humanity's gifts spoke of values, not of power. He reminded himself of this as the last presentation began. The alien leader from the Kether Dominion stepped forward with a smile that carried too much confidence. He was tall, draped in black robes woven with silver threads that glimmered like circuitry. His voice boomed through the chamber without need of amplification. "Gift exchange time," he said casually, almost playfully. A ripple of amusement moved through the council. Everyone leaned forward. When the Kether presented something, it was never ordinary. Two attendants dragged forward a container, long and coffin-like, covered with a veil of metallic fabric. With deliberate slowness, they pulled it away. Gasps echoed around the chamber. What stood revealed was not a weapon of steel, not a crystal or an artifact of unimaginable technology, but a living being. A girl. She was humanoid in form, perhaps in her late teens by human measure, though it was difficult to judge age across species. Her skin bore pale luminescence, like faint blue light pulsing beneath the surface, veins glowing with unnatural rhythm. Across her arms and legs were scars, not accidental wounds, but precise surgical marks, reminders of invasive procedures. Her eyes glowed faintly amber, unfocused at first, then sharp, as if trained to search for threats instinctively. She stood upright without trembling, though her breathing was shallow, measured like someone conditioned to suppress weakness. The envoy's throat tightened. He had expected advanced machinery, a weapon of mass destruction, maybe a device that bent time. But this was no device. This was a person. Murmurs rippled across the audience. Some aliens admired the craftsmanship of the Kether, nodding approvingly. Others showed surprise at such a brazen presentation. Humans exchanged sharp glances, unease painted on their faces. The Kether leader spread his arms. "Behold, the fruit of our perfection. She is a living weapon, engineered to channel destructive energy beyond calculation. Loyal, obedient, and tireless. A gift fit for an ally, or a master." His grin widened. "And today, we present her to humanity." The words landed like a hammer. The envoy's chest tightened with indignation. This was no gift. This was bondage, cruelty dressed in ceremony. But he remained still, his training demanding silence until the right moment. The girl did not move. Her gaze drifted slowly until it met his. For the briefest instant, the facade of obedience cracked. Behind the glow of her engineered eyes, something flickered, an unspoken plea, curiosity, maybe even fear. He wasn't sure. But he knew in that moment that she was aware, not a tool, not an object. The council buzzed with whispers. Some speculated on her abilities. Others laughed at humanity's predicament. The envoy heard fragments, words like fortunate, dangerous, burden, power. All spoken as if the girl had no ears, no mind, no self. The Kether leader gestured with casual pride. "Her name is irrelevant. She is designed, not born. But she responds to commands, unleashes devastation upon enemies, and obeys without hesitation. A perfect soldier, a perfect servant. A gift, freely given to humanity, so you may learn what real power is. Every syllable burned in the envoy's mind. He clenched his jaw to restrain the words building behind his teeth. He had seen cruelty before, on earth and beyond, but never so publicly paraded as virtue. His eyes returned to the girl. She still held his gaze, steady now, as if searching for something only he could offer. His fellow humans whispered in alarm. Accepting her would be complicity. Rejecting her could be seen as insult, risking diplomatic collapse. Every option was weighted with consequence. Yet beneath it all, the envoy knew what mattered most was not the politics, not the council's judgment, but the fragile being standing before him, alive, conscious, and trapped. For the first time, he noticed her hands. Faint tremors betrayed her calm stance, subtle but unmistakable. She was afraid. Not of the Kether. Not even of the humans. Afraid of herself, of what she had been made into. And as the Kether leader gestured with mocking flourish, the envoy realized the truth. This gift was no gift at all. It was a declaration, a challenge, and a cruelty rolled into one. The chamber brimmed with murmurs, but his focus narrowed to her. The council blurred into background noise. All he saw was the faint glow of her eyes, the scars across her skin, the posture of someone taught to endure. And in that silence between them, he understood, whatever came next, whatever risk, he could not allow her to remain what they called her, a weapon. The council chamber seemed to vibrate with tension as silence lingered after the unveiling. The alien leader's words still echoed, a gift, a weapon, obedience. The humans at the envoy's side exchanged uncertain glances, weighed down by the impossible choice before them. Accept her, and humanity condoned slavery. Reject her, and insult an empire powerful enough to crush fledgling colonies. The envoy rose to his feet. His pulse hammered, but his voice was steady. "She is not a gift," he said, the words carrying into the chamber, sharp and deliberate. "She is alive. A person. And no one owns a person." Murmurs turned into a storm. Some laughed, dismissive. Others hissed in disdain. The Kether leader tilted his head, amusement gleaming in his predatory eyes. "Human sentiment," he drawled. "You speak of freedom as if it means anything. She was made to serve. She was bred for obedience. She has no self beyond destruction. Watch, she will prove it." He snapped his fingers. The girl stiffened instantly, body locked in trained response. Her hands rose, faint light gathering between her palms. The chamber's air thickened, energy coalescing into a crackling wave. The envoy felt it like static along his skin, the raw potential to tear matter apart. Gasps filled the air as she unleashed it forward, an arc of searing energy slamming into the reinforced wall of the chamber, splintering alloys said to be indestructible. The ground trembled, light flared, and then silence followed. The girl collapsed to one knee, chest heaving, faint tremors racking her frame. Her glow dimmed. The council roared in awe. Many clapped, some hissed in satisfaction. The Kether leader spread his arms as though unveiling perfection. "Behold! Power at your command. Tireless. Absolute." But while others gawked, the envoy moved. He crossed the space quickly, ignoring protocol, ignoring the stairs. He knelt beside her, offering water from his flask. For a moment she froze, unaccustomed to such a gesture. Then, hesitantly, she accepted. Her lips touched the rim, her trembling fingers brushing his hand as she drank. The chamber fell quieter, the spectacle suddenly feeling different. No one had ever knelt beside her before. No one had treated her as anything but a display. The envoy looked up, locking eyes with the Kether leader. "You may call her a weapon. You may parade her as a prize. But I will not." His voice was steady, resolute. "I don't command people. She chooses what she wants." The words struck like thunder. Shock rippled through the audience. The idea of choice was almost laughable to many who watched, yet the defiance could not be ignored. The Kether leader sneered. You think yourself noble. In truth, you are weak. She has no will. She was born in a lab, not a home. She is a construct, not a person. The envoy ignored him. He turned to her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. You decide what happens next. Not me. Not them. You. For the first time, she seemed to falter, not from exhaustion, but from confusion. Her engineered mind, drilled with obedience, stumbled at the concept. The glow of her eyes flickered, her gaze softening as though she were processing something alien. Finally, she whispered a word so faint only he caught it. Choice. He nodded. Yes. Yours. Something shifted. Not in her body, but in her presence. A tiny spark lit behind her expression, like a dormant flame touched by air. She stood slowly, legs unsteady yet determined. And when the Kether leader barked another command, she didn't move. Gasps spread like wildfire. The silence that followed was heavier than her demonstration of destruction. She had disobeyed. Even slightly, even hesitantly, it was rebellion. The leader's voice sharpened, anger replacing his earlier amusement. Obey. She turned her head, gaze steady on the envoy. Her lips parted, and though her voice trembled, her words carried, I do not want to. The chamber erupted. Some shouted in fury, others in astonishment. For generations, the Kether had boasted of flawless obedience in their creations. And here, before the council, that perfection cracked. The envoy remained by her side. He didn't lift a hand to restrain her, didn't issue an order. He simply stood near, an anchor in the storm. His calm presence gave weight to her fragile rebellion. Other humans in the delegation were split. Some whispered of catastrophe, that this defiance could trigger war. Others looked at her with wonder, realizing what this meant. If engineered obedience could falter under the weight of compassion, then perhaps the Kether's dominion was weaker than anyone believed. The Kether leader's face twisted with rage. Yet to strike now would reveal desperation, weakness. He could only seethe, his performance unraveling under the eyes of 100 watching species. The envoy looked once more at the girl. She stood straighter now, no longer crumpled by exhaustion, though her body still trembled from her earlier release of energy. Something new lived in her eyes, not the emptiness of a weapon, but the fragile beginnings of identity. She whispered again, just loud enough to carry in the stunned silence. If I may choose, I choose to stand. And she moved to the envoy's side, her steps uncertain but deliberate, until she stood shoulder to shoulder with him. For the first time in her existence, she ignored her makers. For the first time, she belonged to herself. The chamber could barely contain the uproar, but the envoy said nothing more. His statement had already been made. Not in defiance of diplomacy, not in arrogance, but in simple humanity. Where others saw a weapon, he saw a person. And in the heart of the weapon that breathed, a seed had been planted, small, fragile, but alive. The uproar of the chamber faded with time, but the fracture it caused lingered long after the ceremony ended. The Kether leader departed in silent fury, his entourage tight-lipped and bristling with hostility. Other delegations whispered about the spectacle, some mocking the humans, others quietly intrigued. But the envoy thought only of her, the girl who had defied her makers. She followed him as if tethered by invisible thread, not out of conditioning but because she chose to. Each step she took was uncertain, but it was hers, and that distinction made it sacred. In the quiet halls beyond the council chamber, she spoke little. Her gaze darted to every corner, her posture taut like a creature unused to freedom. The envoy offered her food, something simple from the human provisions. Bread, fruit, a container of water. She studied it as though expecting a command, then slowly reached out. When she bit into the fruit, her eyes widened in surprise. The taste was alien to her, a contrast to the nutrient slurries she had been fed in containment. A faint sound escaped her throat, not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. She chewed thoughtfully, then whispered, "It feels alive." The envoy smiled. Food is meant to nourish more than the body. It connects us to where we come from. She tilted her head. We were not given food, only fuel. Every word revealed more of her life. She had no name, no memories of childhood. Her world had been white walls, harsh voices, commands drilled into her bones. Pain was her teacher, obedience her reward. She was told she was not someone, only something. And now, for the first time, she tasted choice. The envoy asked if she wanted a name. Her eyes flickered with hesitation. A name is for a person. You are a person, he said simply. She studied him, as if measuring the truth of his words. Finally, almost shyly, she asked, "What would you call me?" He thought of Earth, of the stars and oceans, of resilience. Then he offered a word soft on the tongue, a name that meant dawn in his language. She repeated it slowly, awkward at first, then again with more confidence. The name settled on her like a cloak, fragile but real. For the first time, she carried identity. In the days that followed, she remained close. She listened when he spoke of Earth, of music that stirred hearts, of stories passed down generations, of laughter around fires in the cold of night. She asked endless questions. What did it mean to play? What did it mean to dream? Why did humans paint, sing, write? He answered as best he could, sometimes stumbling for words, because explaining humanity was like explaining breath itself. Yet she absorbed it all, her curiosity blooming where once there had been only silence. One evening, she asked a question that lingered heavy in the air. If I am not a weapon, then what am I? The envoy met her gaze. You are what you decide to be. Her brow furrowed. The concept was simple, yet impossibly vast. To decide. To be. She whispered the words to herself, as though testing their weight. For someone forged to obey, the idea of self was more powerful than any energy she could unleash. Their bond deepened, not through grand declarations but through moments small and human. She tried to mimic laughter after hearing the human's joke, though it came out strange and stilted at first. She learned to walk without expecting commands. She touched the walls of the station as though the texture itself was worth memorizing. Each discovery was hers, and each time, he treated it not as novelty but as a victory. Others watched with suspicion. Alien envoys muttered that humanity was softening a weapon, blunting its edge. Kether spies reported back that the experiment was failing. Yet what they called failure was transformation. Where obedience crumbled, willpower grew. Where emptiness had been, meaning sprouted. One day, she tested him with a question sharpened by years of conditioning. What do you want me to do with my body? Her voice carried no seduction, only the cold precision of a soldier trained to offer herself as tool. But the words hung with double weight, and for a heartbeat he faltered. Then he answered carefully, firmly, "Nothing. It's yours, not mine." Confusion shadowed her features. But I was built to serve. You were built to survive. The rest is your choice. His words pierced deeper than any blade. She fell silent, her mind unraveling threads of conditioning, grappling with a truth that unsettled yet freed her. That night she whispered to herself again, testing the word like a fragile flame, choice. Slowly, she began to change. Her posture loosened, her eyes carried more than obedience, they carried wonder. She tried human food not as fuel but as pleasure, savoring taste. She attempted to hum after hearing recordings of music, her voice unsteady but earnest. She asked for stories each night, not because she needed them, but because she wanted them. And in her, something powerful stirred. Not the destructive energy forced into her veins, but something greater. Humanity's greatest weapon was not technology, not armies, not firepower. It was compassion, the ability to see a weapon as a person, and a person as worth more than power. The Kether believed they had gifted humanity dominance. Instead, they had revealed their own weakness. They could manufacture obedience, but not soul. And soul was what humans recognized instantly, even in someone the rest of the galaxy dismissed as an object. She looked at the envoy one evening, eyes bright with something new, something fierce. "If I may choose," she said, voice steady, "then I choose to stand with you." And in that moment, The bond between them was no longer fragile, no longer uncertain. It was unbreakable. She was no longer a weapon. She was alive. The tension that had rippled through the council chamber did not fade into whispers. It grew into tremors across the stars. The Kether were humiliated, their perfect obedience proven flawed in the sight of dozens of species. Whispers spread of a weapon that disobeyed, of a girl who stood beside a human envoy instead of kneeling. Some dismissed it as a trick, others as weakness, but in the corners of the galaxy where empires were held together by fear, the story planted doubt. And doubt was poison to control. The envoy knew retaliation was inevitable. The Kether would not allow the crack in their image to widen unchecked. Yet he did not falter. Each day, as they prepared for the next round of talks, he taught her not orders but choices. He asked if she wished to sit or stand, to listen or speak, to learn or rest. At first the questions bewildered her. She hesitated every time, struggling against the weight of training that told her choice was an illusion. But with each answer she gave, no matter how small, her confidence grew. One day she chose silence. Another day she chose to eat. Then, astonishingly, she chose to laugh, a sharp, awkward sound that echoed in the sterile halls. For her it was rebellion as powerful as breaking chains. The moment of reckoning came sooner than expected. A Kether warship anchored above the neutral station, its presence both a threat and a demand. They wanted her back. They wanted the failure erased. Delegates from weaker worlds urged compliance, whispering that no human should risk annihilation over one constructed girl. Yet the envoy stood before them all and said, without hesitation, "She is not theirs to take. She chooses where she belongs." When the summons arrived, they entered the chamber together. The Kether leader's fury burned hotter than the engines of his ship. Soldiers lined the walls, their weapons humming with restrained energy. He spoke with venom. "Return the asset. She is ours. Or be crushed with her." The envoy did not raise his voice. He looked at the girl beside him and said, "It's your choice." Every gaze turned to her. The weight of empires pressed down. Fear swelled inside her, the old conditioning whispering that she was a weapon, that disobedience meant pain, that choice was a lie. But then she remembered the taste of fruit, the warmth of a name, the sound of her own strange laughter. She remembered the word he had given her like a spark in the dark, person. Her voice trembled at first, then hardened into steel. "I am not your weapon. I am not your asset. I choose freedom." The declaration cracked the chamber open like thunder. Gasps rang out, shouts erupted, weapons leveled. The Kether leader snarled, spittle flying as he barked for her obedience. But she did not move. For the first time in her existence, she stood on her own will, not their command. The envoy raised his hand calmly, no weapon drawn, no threat made. "If you strike her, you prove you never had control. If you strike us, you prove you fear freedom more than power. Either way, the galaxy will know." The leader's rage quivered on the edge of violence. Yet hesitation cracked his posture, for he understood the truth. To destroy her now was to confirm their weakness. To reclaim her by force was to admit she was more than a weapon, because only a person could rebel. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. At last, with a hiss of fury, the leader turned away. "Then keep your failure. But remember, human, your compassion will be your ruin." The soldiers withdrew, the warship disengaged, and the Kether departed. But the envoy knew it was not the end. They would return, in shadows and schemes, to reclaim what they lost. Yet in that moment, victory belonged not to him, but to her. In the days that followed, her transformation accelerated. She walked without fear of command, spoke without waiting for permission, and even questioned her own past without flinching. She asked about Earth, about oceans and forests, about skies filled with color. He promised she would see them one day, not as a possession or experiment, but as a guest, as family. At night, when the station grew quiet, she sometimes asked questions that cut deeper than any blade. "Was I ever truly alive before?" And he would answer honestly, "You were surviving. Now you are living." Her power remained vast, a force that could shatter ships and scorch armies, but it no longer defined her. What defined her was the way she laughed clumsily, the way she tested every choice as though it were a treasure, the way she carried her name like a shield. The galaxy saw a weapon. The humans saw a girl who had chosen to be more. News spread fast. Other species whispered of the envoy's defiance, of the weapon that breathed who spoke of freedom. Some doubted, some feared, but others began to wonder if the Kether's creations were not as absolute as they claimed. Rumors reached the ears of other living weapons, planted in secret across the stars. And within those rumors, seeds of rebellion stirred. The envoy understood the danger. He had not just saved her, he had lit a fire. But when he looked at her, he did not regret it. She was proof that humanity's strength was not in fleets or firepower, but in seeing value where others saw none. One evening, as they looked out a viewport at the stars, she spoke with quiet certainty. "They called me a weapon. But you showed me something greater." "What's that?" he asked. She smiled, small but real. "That I can be human, even if I was not born one." The word struck him with a weight beyond pride. Humanity had not given her blood or genetics, but it had given her something more enduring, the idea of freedom, the courage to claim herself. And so, in the endless sprawl of the galaxy, a story took root, that when an empire gifted a weapon, the humans returned a person. That where others saw tools, humans saw souls. That compassion was not weakness, but the sharpest blade of all. She was no longer the weapon that breathed. She was the girl who chose. And beside her, humanity had proven once again that its greatest power was not destruction, but the defiance to say, "No one owns a life."